Imagine a world within which people were not as quick to react in a negative way, to point the finger at someone, to blame them, to attack even. Imagine a world within which people considered their part in what was happening around them. And to help us with that imagining, I'm going to draw a distinction between reacting and responding. Reacting can be negative, it can be positive, it can be neutral. Reactions are generally connected to two things. One, strong emotions. Two, habits. Could be a combination of both. Strong emotions, as you'll probably be aware, can cause us to do things that, well, sometimes we regret later on, and that is in part because the executive suite, our ability to be more considered in our thinking, is often switched off to a degree or dialed down, and our more primitive thinking is at play. Could be connected to survival, but by and large, when we get strong emotions involved, our thinking is quite binary, as them and us, is right and wrong, and normally we're the us and they're the them, and we're right and they're wrong. And when that happens, we can make mistakes and we can exacerbate situations. Habits are also, in some senses, reactions. Consider someone who's trained. Let's say they have, like that guy who's at Lewis Hamilton, the Formula One driver, and he started off in go-karts from a young age and was laying down those neural pathways to help him judge distance and speed, position on the track, etc., etc. And of course he's gone on to achieve amazing things in terms of that particular sport. But what he's doing a lot of the time is without thinking. That doesn't mean to say he's not thinking, as are a lot of those drivers, but the basic stuff he's got to do without thinking because he has to focus on other things like position, like strategy, like communication with his team, again, as all those other drivers do. And what that implies is that there are neural pathways, there's circuitry involved which can allow us to do things without thinking. And away from the glitz and glamour, if you consider it to be so, of Formula One, there is the more mundane stuff, the going for a run, the food that we eat, the way that we answer the phone, sometimes the route that we take to work, etc., etc., that we do with that thing called autopilot switched on. And that's in many ways a good thing because it allows us to do other things. There's not a cognitive load in doing those things. But that can also mean that our habits can be less than useful for us. You've probably heard of the word triggered before, or triggering, and one of the reasons that we can be triggered, yes, there are emotions at play, as I mentioned already, and also we can have a particular neural route that we go down when we hear that thing. Oh, it's them. Oh, it's that. We make assumptions. These could be considered in some ways to be a form of bias. There's certainly a lens that we look at the world through. And when we get into particular types of thinking about ourselves, about our environment, then we can be triggered, so to speak, by a stimulus or stimuli. And that may be less than optimum for us and for people around us. Responding, by contrast, in my language, means to take a step back, to be much more aware of those emotions, to allow them to dissipate to a degree at least, and to look at the bigger picture, to think perhaps more laterally, to look at what would be a good thing to do here? What is the ethical thing to do? What is the moral thing to do? What is the goal that I want ultimately from this situation? And then to choose that particular response. Again, the choice implying cognition, implying judgment and not reactivity, based on strong emotions and or habits. And that ability to step back, that ability to choose, that ability to be considered is more and more and more important for all of us, because you will be triggered if you allow yourself to be. Strong emotions are at play across the planet. And some people benefit from us reacting and not thinking, and living in a bit of a quagmire of strong and often negative emotions. We've got to find ways to train ourselves to access stuff that can allow us to do this, forms of thinking, material, models, paradigms, that we can rise above it and consider what is the right thing to do in this particular situation. And that's what I'm interested in sharing with people and teaching people. I've done this for years. This is a very obvious overlap between self-leadership and positional leadership. We need leaders who are considered, who are moral and ethical. We need all of us to lead ourselves and not be so prone to falling into the traps, which are in some ways deliberately laid around us, but not all the time. And also to really think at a higher level and consider this thing that I've called rightness, doing the right thing. And that may be connected to doing the right thing in the right way, at the right time, for the right reason. And all of those things come into play. And I'm going to finish off this little video with the word reflexivity, which you may or may not have heard about. And that is often used in research. It's often a term which is bandied around, that it can mean many different things to many different people. In part, it is considering our thoughts whilst we're doing research, is perhaps keeping a journal. But another part of one definition of reflexivity is to consider what we're doing that has impacted what is around us in often a research situation, but I think we can take that and think about it in terms of life. What are we doing in this situation that is causing how people are reacting around us to react? What is the trigger for them? Are we the trigger? Is what we're doing, our behaviors, our actions, our words, our demeanor, doing things which we find objectionable around us? Because it's so easy to point that finger to say, it's them, it's this, it's that. But what have we done? Sometimes nothing, of course. Sometimes we are beyond reproach, of course. But sometimes also we're creating some of those things that we see around us, and then it becomes a cascade, and then those reactions bounce back towards us, and it's just a loop, a spiral that tends to head downwards. So have a think. Where are you perhaps in the first instance reacting or being a little bit bull in a china shop-ish and causing people around you, situations to manifest that, with a bit of consideration from you and me and other people and responding, we could begin to attenuate some of those more negative things that we see around us. And so, reacting, habits, strong emotions, sometimes both, responding, stepping back, looking at the bigger picture, being more considered, nuanced and subtle in our thinking, and then ultimately in our action, choosing to do the right thing, and considering what we have around us right now. How much of what I have, you have, is what we created by our own actions. And when we really face that truth and decide to change ourselves, then we can change so much about us in a positive way. But that doesn't mean to say that there aren't people around us who are also reactive. There's nothing to do with us. There aren't people and groups around us who would love it if we would become more reactive and dumb our own thinking down because of our emotions that we've allowed to manifest, because we've allowed ourselves to be triggered. Anyway, hopefully food for thought. If you're interested, let me know, and we'll explore some other areas in that particular domain. For the moment, from me, bye for now.